You're listening to Stealing from Wizards, Volume 4, Arson, by R.A. Consul. Chapter 10. Crumbs. Dragons are obligate carnivores with a preference for large ungulates, though they are not known for being particular. Anyone intending to keep a dragon should first secure a reliable food source. Caribou and bison are recommended. As more weeks passed, Kuro grew to need Marie's abuse of authority nights more and more. They were a brief island of calm in a sea of obligations. But that island was sinking. The obligations grew by the week, dwindling the attendance and frequency of the get-togethers. Managing a full load of classes while trying to feed a dragon and appease a distrustful Luton was, to say the least, taxing. Having to abandon Charlie while he did it was worse by half. She was lonely. So was Kuro, to be honest. In past years, they'd shared classes and bedrooms with friends. Now they had to schedule visits and submit to security checks just to see Marie outside of school, and Arthur was becoming shockingly popular. People had gotten it into their heads that spending time with him, as her closest aide and frequent body double, was the next best thing to hanging out with the Queen. The introverted changeling had more invitations to dinner, tea, and private study than he knew how to handle. His work as a spy demanded he accept, building a dossier of connections, favors, and scandal. The necessity didn't come with training or a personality transplant. By report, they were often harrowing experiences, especially the ones that included romantic overtures. But he was learning fast. Charlie rarely made it over to Summerhill to see her old roommate, because most of her evenings were eaten by some first year in need of emotional, academic, or medical support. Kuro, spending almost every evening in the kitchen, practicing his cooking and helping the Luton, was hardly justification for neglecting Charlie. But he had promises to keep and cookies to bake. One thing that redeemed him in the eyes of his friend were the results of his baking. Yes, he often left her alone with her children and homework, but when he did appear, late in the evening, he came armed with treats. "Did you do something different with the cookies this time?" she asked as she littered her own bed with the crumbs. "Salted caramel," said Kuro. "We made some in class this week. I thought it would go well with the marshmallow filling." "They're fantastic," she said, mashing a second into her mouth. "Have you considered using them as a tool of seduction?" This was not the first time Charlie had raised the subject of romance. She seemed fixated on at least one of them kissing somebody before the end of the year. He could understand her desire for companionship, but wasn't sure why she wished to thrust it upon him. "I am way too busy to try to seduce anyone," he said. "I barely see you as it is. I don't need someone else in my life to ignore. Besides, I have the west wind." "The wind is not your girlfriend," asserted Charlie, though a gust of wind, further messing her already unruly hair, argued the claim. "She's a force of nature, not a person. Don't you want somebody to snog and snuggle and stuff?" He didn't, really, and he didn't know why. Everyone else seemed to want to lock lips more than anything else, and he barely saw the appeal. He imagined it would be like mashing his face against a tepid ham. Given the choice, he'd prefer the ham. At least with that, he could make a sandwich out of the leftovers. Luton grew up at different rates than humans, so maybe he was just a bit behind. Maybe his creators had missed that part of him, or purposely left it out. They did want him to be a perfect servant. Falling in love was a great way to divide his loyalties. Or maybe he was just afraid. He flopped next to Charlie on her bed and stole the last of the cookies he had brought her. "Not everyone gets to be like Sean and Gregory," he said. "Most break up fast and bad. Remember Geneviève and Pietro? You could hear them screaming at each other from across the campus. And then all their friends had to pick sides. I don't have enough to lose half." "You know, you give really depressing answers to what should be fun gossip." She snatched the last half of the last cookie from his hand in revenge and shoved it entirely in her mouth before he could counter her. "You're worse than Marie," she said while chewing. At least she would talk about who she thought was cute, even if she refused to admit having a crush on anyone. Well then, show me how it's done, wise one, teased Kuro. Who do you think is, as you say, cute? Oh man, where do I start? Charlie spat Cookie in her excitement. I mean, there's just something about a girl in uniform, you know what I mean, right? She gave him a look that might have been considered lascivious, if not for her cheeks bulging with half-chewed sweets. But everyone here wears a uniform, Kuro replied. I know! Charlie threw herself back onto her bed, despairing the ordeal she suffered daily. How do they expect us to pay any attention in school? Kuro tried to imagine how people gossiped about these things and asked as a follow-up, is there any uniform you specifically like the contents of? No, replied Charlie, and busied herself with chewing. A single-syllable answer from Charlie was already suspect, and the surly tone elevated it to unbelievability. He crossed his arms, pursed his lips, and stared her down. If he needed to fill in for Marie in these conversations, he would do the best he possibly could. Charlie did not appear to appreciate the impression. She hugged a pillow to her chest, armor against his skeptical scowl, and glared at him. Nobody that matters, she clarified. She barely knows I exist. Do you need me to fix that? I could kidnap her for you. Chain her up in your room, suggested Kuro. I am a very dangerous criminal. He waggled his eyebrows with comical villainy. She threw her pillow at him. He left that night with a personal mission. He would find out who Charlie had fallen for, and, if possible, turn their affections towards her. Not that he had any skill in that regard, short of the crimes he'd suggested, which Charlie had insisted would not be helpful. As with anything Kuro dedicated himself to, his efforts were almost immediately undermined. Charlie was, herself, extremely uncooperative. Rather than pretending not to have a crush on anyone, which was standard practice for most high school students, Charlie seemed to have a crush on everyone. She'd strain her neck if somebody walked by with a bright smile, exposed midriff, or particularly fancy hairstyle. She'd talk endlessly about girls who were clever, funny, or pretty. As was her way, Charlie hid her secrets by camouflaging them in the tangled jungle of information that streamed from her. Other forces were also arrayed against him. Shingo! He snarled into the inky blackness he found himself in. It's the middle of the night, and I have school tomorrow. Couldn't this wait? He was certain that the Luton purposely waited for the worst moment to grab him. He was in pajamas and half done brushing his teeth. The one who answered his complaints was not Shingle, however. Sorry, Baker. Kuro felt Maripogo's voice like a thunderstorm in his mind. There was a kindness to it, but a patronizing one, like an apology made to a pet for serving its dinner late. Honest, but trivial. It is I who summoned you, and the time of day means little here. That might be true for the dragon, but not so for Shingle. He was sure she could have waited 5 minutes so he wouldn't have a mouthful of toothpaste for this conversation. I have a complaint about your cooking, the dragon said. Do you not like the cookies? Kuro blubbered in panic. He didn't even know which way to face in the utter void of the cavern. Quite the opposite, replied the dragon. They're delicious. But before we met, you produced such a wide array of treats for me. What happened? You said you liked the cookies, explained Kuro. So I made more. A lot of the things I was making before were bad. Bad, yes, but interesting. She released a brief puff of flame along with the final word, illuminating her terrifying and beautiful face for a moment. He'd forgotten how big she was. His mind simply couldn't hold it all in and had shrunk her down to fit. There's little to do here in my nest. Sleep and eat. Sleep and eat. If not for variety in my diet, I might become bored. So you want me to start making weird things again? Guessed Kuro. Yes, she said with ravenous anticipation. Good night, Baker. A moment later, he was outside standing on the roof of the tall tower of the high school. Shingo! He shouted into the empty night. Oi, what are you doing up there? Merle stepped out onto the tower balcony just below him. "Couldn't sleep? Went for a walk? Tripped on a shingle?" muttered Kuro, a poor explanation for his current predicament, given his bare feet and toothbrush in hand. "Well, get down here before you get hurt," Merle ordered. Then, under his breath, he added, "Bloody students." Kuro was in no danger of getting hurt. He'd been about to hurl himself from the tower with full confidence the wind would catch him. He wasn't inclined to risk trouble for himself by disobeying Merle. It wasn't clear how much authority the man had in the school, but it was certainly more than Kuro. He slid down the slate shingles and landed gracefully on the small tower balcony next to Merle, who was clutching his chest in shock at the casual acrobatics Kuro had performed. "Now, tell me straight, who put you up there? Was it kids from your own house or another? I don't abide bullying. Can't put 'em in detention or nothing, but I'll see they get a wobbly desk in every class from now till solstice." Thanks, but I'm fine." It was a pleasant surprise to find the surly groundskeeper had a soft spot for the underdogs of the school. Kuro couldn't explain his situation, though, without raising some follow-up questions he did not want to answer. "It was mostly an accident," he said. Merle did not pry, but also did not appear to believe a word the boy said. Not unjustly, as very little of what Kuro had ever told the custodian had been completely true. He was led into the tower chamber, which appeared to be a moderately curated trash heap. Knickknacks and oddments were stacked one upon another. Fancy pens, enchanted spectacles, winged bicycles, brooms, books, and an entire billiard table. That last being used only as a surface on which to pile more things. "What's all this junk doing here?" asked Kuro. It seemed the least convenient place on the island to store a collection of large, unwieldy objects. "These are my things," said Merle. "This is my room." Upon Merle pointing it out, Kuro indeed saw a small bed nestled behind a surfboard. "Most of this stuff is from the lost and found what was never claimed. Them rich kids are always leaving stuff behind. Can't bear to see treasures like this in a trash heap. Look at this." He held up a fountain pen with a platinum nib and emerald handle and gazed adoringly at it. "It's an auto-calligrapher. Takes dictation in whatever font you want, so long as it's a fancy one. And this here?" He pointed to a bicycle missing its seat and several spokes. "Genuine skimmer, that is. Rides as smooth on gravel and sand as on flat concrete. A true classic." "Where did you get that?" Kuro asked, pointing to an absurdly fancy chessboard. Mother of pearl and ebony squares, ivory and obsidian pieces, all on a marble pedestal. Based on the dirty mug and brown rings stained on its surface, it was being used as a coffee table. "Oh, do you play?" asked Merle. "I fished that out of the trash end of last year, if you can believe it. Found most of the pieces, too. It's one of them fancy paired ones, but nobody's playing on the other side. Could be the other end's broken and that's why they trashed it. Still, such a waste. It's a work of art." Kuro was familiar with this particular board, or at least its partner. He'd encountered it in the offices of Claudius Roche. "Who threw it away?" "How am I supposed to know that? Folk don't label their garbage." Merle scoffed at the question. "Anyway, I'm happy to have a game with you, but I'm not giving it up if that's what you're asking." "No, I don't know how to play," Kuro said, with the intention of continuing his investigation into the origins of the board. The creeping worry that another copy of Roche was hiding on Avalon surged. This was proof that he had been there and might still be. Merle didn't let him get another word in, though. He exploded with incredulity. "Don't know how to play chess? That's criminal. Did you grow up under a rock or something?" Noting the hour on one of the several fine clocks scattered through the space, he urged Kuro out of his room with a demand. "It's too late tonight, but you get back here after classes tomorrow and I'll set you right." Thank you for listening to Stealing from Wizards. If you liked our show, please consider rating or reviewing on iTunes. If you want to support this podcast or just can't wait for the next chapter, the full book is available on Amazon, Kobo, and Indigo. Our theme music was written by Camille Saint-Saëns, transcribed by Franz Liszt, performed by Rebecca Verdun, and used with permission. This episode was produced by Jim Tigwell.